Every transformation is an offspring of imagination. At first, they seem so elusive, until the crimson sun rises inside your heart and mind. Sow the seeds of hopes and dreams. Every person leaves the house of their untold fantasy. Faith and belief bless us with vitality. In a vast field between the grasses of Kogon, a destiny is devised from the elements of the universe. Words from heaven performed. A single hope is built on the future of mankind. A rich abundance of Indonesian Muslims. All have dreamt that a great civilization will be born, where the responsibility of achieving it is upon their shoulders. After centuries of presence in the archipelago, now the time has come for Indonesian Muslims to provide greater contributions for a better world. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018, this campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected. We believe God's grace flows without stopping, loving all beings without exception.
As an inclusive campus, IIU welcomes anyone regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts.
IIU is a comprehensive house of learning. This does not mean that it is only a place for teaching and learning, but also a strategic, scientific laboratory and a center for culture and civilization. These make up the three pillars of Universitas Islam International Indonesia.
IIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. For this reason, IIU is committed to providing quality services that are responsive to the various needs of the campus community and become a new, emerging green campus in the region. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth.
Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University, a university that stands together in a diversity of cultures, languages, history, and also the beliefs inherent in the identity of Indonesia as a multicultural archipelagic country. Indonesian International Islamic University is the first international Islamic university in Indonesia, that not only explores Islamic studies, but also introduces to the world an advanced Islamic civilization in Indonesia that is able to make a positive contribution through discovery, research, and global achievement.
Do you need high quality of international education right here in Indonesia? The place is at the Indonesian International Islamic University, or we call it IIIU. IIIU has 4 faculties. One of them is the Faculty of Education. The Faculty of Education offers MA and PhD in education with 4 concentrations. First, curriculum teaching and learning. Second, educational assessment and evaluation. Third, education policy management and leadership. And 4, education and society. The 4 concentrations are designed to represent the ecological system, namely those that focus on the micro context, represented by the concentration of curriculum, teaching and learning, the meso context, represented by the concentration of educational assessment and evaluation, and the concentration of education, policy, management and leadership, while the concentration of education and society represent the context of a larger meso layer, linking it with the macro lenses of economics, politics, anthropology, and sociology of education.
And here, we are at the Faculty of Education, one of the faculty at IIIU designed to produce high-quality transformative educators with a passion for lifelong learning. Our dedication to excellence and innovation sets us apart from the rest, and we are proud to be leading the way toward a brighter future for education.
The IIIU Faculty of Education offers a Master of Arts in Education program that prepares graduates for careers as academics, practitioners, designers, researchers, government officials, managers, supervisors, assessment specialists, evaluators, policy analysts, and consultants at national and international institutions. The program provides a comprehensive foundation in education covering theories, philosophies, practices, and their connection to society and culture. Graduates are equipped with the skill and knowledge necessary to succeed in education. The IIIU Faculty of Education is committed to providing students with a supportive and inclusive community. Our faculty comprises experts dedicated to helping students achieve their academic and professional goals. With resources and support available at IIIU, students have the opportunity to thrive and succeed in their chosen careers in the education sector.
The Faculty of Education is filled with experts and globally recognized lecturers who are able to share their passion, story, journey, and perspective with like-minded students.
Our PhD program is designed for students who are passionate about education and want to make a significant contribution to the field. Our faculty members are experts in their respective areas of research, and our program provides students with the analytical tools and resources they need to conduct groundbreaking research and participate in global discussion. Our application process is highly competitive, but we encourage all qualified students to apply. You can visit our website for more information on the application requirements and deadlines. Let's make your dream come true with study in the PhD program at the Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia.
On more than 140 hectares of land, Indonesian International Islamic University has built dozens of facilities to ensure a seamless experience and also a balance between academic activities and non-academic activities. Indonesian International Islamic University will always support the positive development and freedom of each individual, especially those related to physical, mental, and spiritual development. At IIIU, we will learn more, gain more, and give even more as we believe. Lesson shapes souls. Come and join us to shape the souls and create the future.
Every transformation is an offspring of imagination. At first, they seem so elusive until the crimson sun rises.
Welcome to the second floor. PhD. Guests, staff, students, and participants.
I am Saidu Jallo, MA student, batch 4 from the Gambia.
And I am Fini from Indonesia, also MA student, batch 4. We are delighted and honored to serve as your Master of Ceremony to this wonderful event.
First in our agenda is a discussion that will be delivered by our keynote speaker, Professor Yan Zi from the Education University of Hong Kong.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's keynote speaker will discuss assessment research into enhancing learning and teaching, synergizing assessment for learning and assessment as learning.
The session will be moderated by Faradila Haryani, PhD student by 2. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Okay, so I hope that you have a fresh morning today, yeah? Welcome back to our keynote speaker sessions in our the 4th annual conference with the theme Assessment and Equity in Education. My name is Faradila Haryani. I'm a PhD student batch 2, and I will be your moderator for this keynote speaker session. All right. So yesterday we began our conference journey with very insightful presentation from Dr. Joanna about how does a culture fit if we want to create an inclusive assessment, and then continued by understanding what is the layers, the multi-dimensions of the equity in the assessments. And today's we are going to dive further into the educational assessments with our prominent scholar, Professor Yan Zi from the Education University of Hong Kong. Please give your warm applause to Professor Yan Zi. Please, Professor. Good morning, Professor. It's nice to see you. It's actually my 3rd time seeing you online in educational assessment class about rush measurement. And then last year, I met you in the PROMS conference in Kuala Lumpur. And now we are actually meeting again in person. It's good to see you again. And I hope, I think also, and I believe that everyone here is so excited to meet you and learn from you. But before we are actually starting your insightful presentations, let me introduce you to the audiences, even though I believe that the audiences already know about you, especially in terms of research in educational assessment. Okay. So our prominent scholars today is Professor Yan Zi from the Education University of Hong Kong. Professor Yan Zi is actually a distinguished scholar in the field of educational assessment and rush measurement. Currently, Professor Yan Zi serves as the head of the department of Curriculum and Instruction at the Education University of Hong Kong. He also holds a pivotal role as the co-director of the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and also becoming associate director of the Assessment Research Center at Educational Hong Kong University. Professor Yuan's academic journey is actually marked by his PhD in educational measurement from James Cook University, Australia, and his research primarily focusing on educational assessment in both schools and higher education contexts, with a particular emphasis on the student self-assessment and the application of RAS measurement and educational and psychological research. And his scholarly contributions are extensive and impactful, yeah. One of the current works is about student self-assessment as a process for learning, the first systematic account of student self-assessment research. And also, he is a co-author of the 4th edition of Applying RAS Model Fundamental Measurement in the Human Sciences, our books in educational measurement in the class of Pa Bambang Sumintono. And today, we are actually honored to have Professor Yan Zi, because Professor Yan Zi will talk about educational assessment, especially to synergize the assessment as learning and for learning to enhance learning and teaching. Yesterday, we are actually already know about the type of assessment, including assessment of learning, as learning, and for learning. And now we are going to learn even further with Professor Yan Zi to synergize those two, as learning and also for learning. So please give your warm applause to Professor Yan Zi.
Thank you, thank you. So it's always my great pleasure to visit new places. I think this is my second time to Indonesia, but the first time to this city, this university, a very beautiful city and campus. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope we could have some brainstorming that between you, the audience, and myself in terms of the assessment research. And I do hope we can find some common interest among the Indonesia content and Hong Kong content in terms of how to use the assessment research, assessment data to further promote students' learning. Yeah. So it's time for me to start the presentation. Am I supposed to stick here or? Okay. Okay. I think I'm more prefer staying here because as a teacher, it's also more comfortable. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the topic I want to share with you today is about assessment, especially how we can synergize the teacher-directed and student-initiated assessment, especially in the digital learning environments. I think all of us should be aware or agree that assessment is a very important link in the learning and teaching circle, right? But at the same time, assessment is a very challenging topic. How can we make use of assessment in terms of the further promote students' learning to facilitate teachers' teaching, which I think remains long-lasting challenge for all around the world, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Eastern, Western culture, anywhere. I think this is a long-lasting challenge. I believe Joanna Tai's presentation should also echo this point. This is very challenging, but very important topic we need to address. Okay, before my presentation, I would like to introduce a little bit more about my university, Education University of Hong Kong. In case some of you might not be so familiar with our university. Our university is relatively new one in Hong Kong, focusing on teacher education. We are currently training almost all of the kindergarten teachers in Hong Kong. I think 70 or 80% of primary and 50 or 60% of secondary teachers in Hong Kong. So we are the biggest teacher education institute in Hong Kong. The research strength of university is in the education, of course. So according to the 2025 QS University ranking, our university has been ranked 12th in the world and 4th in Asia in the subject of education. Okay, so the particular area of strength in our university is the, for example, assessment, digital learning, early childhood education, special education. We are all quite interested and have a very strong research capacity. So if any of you have interest to explore some possible collaborations with our university, you're most welcome to reach out to me or any other staff in our university. Okay, my sharing will be divided into three main parts, which are also, of course, interrelated. First of all, I would like to explain why we need to synergize teacher-directed and student-initiated assessment. And then I want to highlight the importance. Okay, thank you. Then I want to highlight the importance of two fundamental components in the assessment, that is self-assessment and feedback literacy, especially in the digital learning environments. And last but not least, I want to update a little bit about my current ongoing project, which is focusing on the so-called student-centered, assessment-driven adaptive learning, which personally I believe should be the future of the digital learning together with the assessment research. Okay, where we start? Why we start to think about the necessary of synergizing teacher and student-directed assessment? I think it all come from the practical issues. In Hong Kong, we have formally or officially by the government promote formative assessment back in 2001. And then after around 10 years of implementation of formative assessment reform, the Hong Kong government have conducted a review about the effectiveness of the formative assessment practice in classrooms, as well as there are many, many scholars, including myself, who are interested in looking into what the impact of formative assessment in classroom. And then both the review results and the empirical study results consistently show that the implementation of formative assessment in Hong Kong classroom was not actually satisfactory. Then why? People would wonder why. Because we have invested a huge amount of resources, and we have done it for more than 10 years, since 2001. Why we still cannot have a satisfactory implementation of formative assessment? So we have done many researches. One of them I show here is very interesting. Okay, we have done a survey study. We want to understand what the predictors of teachers' formative assessment practice in classroom, according to the theory of planned behavior, which is the theoretical framework for our research. And interesting, we found that the teacher's attitude towards formative assessment, the self-efficacy regarding formative assessment, could well predict the intention to do formative assessment, which is aligned with the theory. Okay, if the teachers have, why is this case? Why the teacher has the intention, has the confidence, but they do not do it? After some following interviews, I think the answer actually is not that surprising. It's not quite surprising because it's quite practical. If you're a front-line teacher, you probably can guess why. So, what's your first impression when you look at this figure? Is it similar or like the classroom in Indonesia? Very crowded, right? Very crowded. One teacher needs to cater for, I think, probably 30 in Hong Kong, 25 or 30, probably even more in Indonesia, right? And if you look at the student's face, what did you find? They seem puzzled, right? They seem they do not know what to do next. They are hoping for the direction from the teachers. But look at the teacher. She's busy. She's not lazy, okay? She's busy probably taking attendance, marking the assignment, whatever. She's quite busy. So she just cannot have no time, have no resources to accommodate the students' needs in the classroom. So that's fair, that's very fair. If you need to cater for 30 students in the classroom at the same time, how can you possible to provide individualized feedback to them? But remember, the core of formative assessment is individualized feedback. If you cannot provide individualized feedback, formative assessment becomes useless or unfeasible. Okay, so this is the, although a little bit speculative, but we believe it might be a quite precise description about the effects. So this phenomenon makes us to think. We have invested so much resources on the teacher-directed formative assessment. That is, we want the teacher to do more assessment, continuous assessment, provide individualized feedback, timely feedback, etc. But is teacher-directed formative assessment alone sufficient? I think the answer probably no, at least based on Hong Kong's experiences. Okay, so what's the way out? What can we do? What can we do to address this problem? So this is all the reasons why my team started to study the synergy between the teacher and the teacher-directed and the student-initiated assessment. Because as we discussed before, teacher-directed as formative assessment alone does not work. So we have to make good use of a student agency. We have to empower our students in the assessment process. So since then, my team have done 2 parallel lines of research. One line is about teacher-directed formative assessment, or we can call it assessment for learning. Another line is student-initiated formative assessment, or we can call it assessment as learning. Of course, I understand different scholars might have a slightly different definition or understanding about this for learning, as learning, of learning thing. But here, okay, we just have use it as a framework. So in the line of student-initiated formative assessment research, we have developed our own conceptual framework. For example, we have developed a so-called assessment as learning concepts together with Professor David Bond, which also from Cradle Deakin. We also developed the self-assessment process model. Okay, so based on this theoretical framework or models, we further developed our own instruments. For example, the self-assessment practice scale. Using this series and instruments, we are able to conduct a series of empirical studies, which could be about the impact of the self-assessment, or the self-assessment's relationship with the self-regulated learning, or what the predictors of the self-assessment practice, as well as the how to design effective self-assessment intervention. This is what we have done. And in the near future, I think we will go further along this line. For example, some very important topics include the interaction between student, peer, and teacher assessment, how to better integrate them together simultaneously in the classroom to better serve the students' learning purpose. And what's the AI role in the self-assessment process, which is also one of our ongoing projects we are conducting. And even more, what's the neural mechanism underlying the self-assessment process, which is also interesting. We are trying to do something using the EEG or neuroscience data. Along the other line, that is teacher-directed formative assessment, we also have done a series of studies. In this line, we have adopted the available theoretical framework. For example, the teacher formative assessment literacy and practice from Black and William or Pastor and Andre. And then based on those theories, we have developed our own instruments. For example, the teacher formative assessment literacy scale and teacher formative assessment practice scale, which are very practical and ready for use instruments. So if you want to conduct some research about self-assessment or formative assessment, those instruments could be appropriate for you to use. And I know some of the students today here are actually using some of these instruments for your own research. And in terms of the empirical studies, we have investigated the formative assessment policy in Hong Kong, the formative assessment impact on students' learning. Again, what's the predictors of formative assessment and what's the relationship between formative assessment, mindset, and academic achievement. Okay, so all this is the work we have done. Again, in the near future, if you are interested in the AI-enabled formative assessment, adaptive learning, or how to promote student feedback literacy through formative assessment, if you are interested in this topic, you're most welcome to collaborate with us. So, as a summary, I would like to highlight two important things. What do we need in assessment? I think we can understand it from two perspectives. One is from the research perspective. We need to have a holistic framework to research assessment rather than piece by piece. And we need to use very different types of methodology, including quantitative, qualitative, mixed, theoretical arguments, something like that. We need to research the assessment from different level, different perspective, and different methodologies. Okay. The second perspective is from the practice. What the classroom practice, what kind of assessment the classroom needs. I think there are several key features that can describe the assessment needed in the classroom. Number one is we need to synergize the teacher-directed and student-initiated assessment, formative assessment. That is, the teacher still needs to provide timely feedback as far as you can. But at the same time, the student needs to get involved. They need to be empowered to have their agency during the assessment process. They need to be educated to do self-assessment. They need to be taught in terms of how to develop the feedback literacy. Okay, so they also need to be empowered. And then the assessment design need to reshape the role of different stakeholders, especially students and teachers. Of course, this is relevant to the first point. And also, we need to enhance all stakeholders' assessment literacy, students, teachers, even parents, okay? Because I'm not sure in Indonesia, because in Hong Kong, parents have a huge impact on the school policy and the teachers' practice. What the parents value actually is immediately reflected in the teacher's teaching. Okay, so you can imagine if the parents does not have a high level or acceptance level of feedback literacy, they do not understand the purpose, the importance of formative assessment, it will be a huge hurdle for teachers' practice in classroom. Okay, so teachers also, parents also need to be educated in terms of assessment literacy. So as this figure described, we need to put these things together, assessment as learning and assessment for learning, and all stakeholders involved need to contribute to this synergy. Okay. Here I present to you some of our work, my team's work. For example, there is one book on self-assessment, one book on student assessment literacy, and also we have two edited books about the assessment as learning or the teacher feedback. Okay, so and also I summarize some of our publications as a reference. If you are interested, I will spare a copy to Professor Bang Bang, an organizer. So if you are interested, you can ask for a copy. So if you are interested in assessment as learning, you can refer to some of these references according to your preference or your research content, or for learning. Okay. The second topic, the second part of my presentation, as I mentioned, I want to highlight the importance of self-assessment and feedback literacy in the digital learning environment. Then, of course, the first question is, why do we need to highlight the self-assessment and feedback literacy in the digital learning environments? I think this is because we need to have student agency in the digital learning environment. If you look at the current literature or some of the current classroom practice about digital learning, you probably will find the current practice of digital learning is largely dominated by the machine, okay? In many cases, the learning goals, the learning path, the learning strategy, the subsequent learning materials are determined or manipulated by the machine or by the AI. Where is the role of student agency? And especially if we want to promote student self-regulated learning by digital learning, you have to put the student in control. You have to make the student control the machine, control their own learning, not on the other way. The machine manipulates the students, okay? So this is not what we want in the digital learning. What we really want is the student can make use of the machine or AI or whatever technology tools. They can make friends with them. They can use them as tools, as instruments to further promote their own learning, okay? So this is the so-called student agency we need in the digital learning environments. But how? As a teacher, how can we develop this kind of student agency in the digital learning environments? I think we can, of course, my personal view is we can to look into this issue from these two fundamental components in the student initiated formative assessment. That is self-assessment and feedback literacy. These two concepts are actually very student-centered. By nature, they have to be built on a student agency. Because if there is no student agency, these two components, or these two concepts, or these two practice cannot be well implemented in practice, okay? Of course, these two are distinct concepts, self-assessment and feedback literacy, but they share lots of principles in common, okay? For example, both concepts, self-assessment and feedback literacy, they require the student have a good understanding about their own and the peers' learning process and outcome, okay? That means these two concepts all highlight the requirement for students' self-regulated learning as well as the co-regulated learning. In some cases, people would say it also requires social regulated learning, okay? So it all requires the student to look back at themselves and peers. The second underlying common principle for these two concepts is both of them highlight the importance of students' active role, okay? The student has to be active in order to have meaningful self-assessment. The student has to be active in order to have in order to develop the feedback literacy, to make use of the feedback, to make a good interpretation and take appropriate action upon the feedback. Okay, so both of them require active student role rather than the passive role as we saw in the figure, okay, at the beginning of this presentation. And interestingly and importantly is these two concepts can mutually enhance one another. For example, the feedback literacy could be an enabler in the self-assessment process. Why is the reason? It's because self-assessment is not only about self. Okay, even the term is self, but it's not only about self. Self-assessment actually involves others. And especially for young students, if you want them to have accurate and meaningful self-assessment, they need to seek feedback or support from the external party, especially teachers or peers. Okay, so if others need to be involved in self-assessment, if the external feedback is important in self-assessment, then you can imagine if a student who have a good level of assessment literacy, he or she is supposed to have a better self-assessment than a student who have a lower level of assessment literacy. Okay, so this is a so-called enabling role of feedback literacy in the self-assessment process. On the other hand, self-assessment could provide lots of opportunity for students to develop their feedback literacy. Because, as I said before, there are so many interactions between the students themselves and the peers and teachers and other external parties. The more self-assessment students do, the more opportunities they will have in terms of how to seek feedback, understand feedback, make sense of feedback, interpret feedback, and take action upon feedback. So there are huge amount of opportunity for students to further develop their feedback literacy during the self-assessment process. Okay. Here is an example. This is a recent, more updated self-assessment model recently developed by David Callis and myself. You can see that the self-assessment could be unfolded as 3 steps: determining and applying assessment criteria, self-reflection, and self-assessment judgment and calibration. And during the whole process, feedback seeking plays a crucial role. Okay, for all the 3 steps, the teacher and students themselves need to seek feedback from different sources in order to have a better assessment criteria, better self-assessment judgment. Okay. So you can see this is an enabling role of assessment literacy in the self-assessment process. AI, okay. So I think AI is always a very hit topic anywhere, anytime nowadays. Just 2 weeks ago when I attended an AI conference, I think almost every session I attended, no matter what topic it is, there's always some session about, or some papers about AI. It is the same in the assessment field, okay? More and more paper or study about this topic. Okay, what can AI really bring to assessment? I think it's very simple. AI can provide instant feedback, and AI could be, in many cases, is available anytime, anywhere, okay? And AI could offer different types of feedback according to the student's feedback literacy or according to the student's prompts capacity. And to some extent, AI can enhance the student agency because during the interaction between AI and the students actually is taking an active role because all the questions are raised by students themselves rather than by the AI or by the teachers, right? And a positive byproduct of AI is because during the interaction with AI, the students do not need to disclose themselves, especially weakness, to a human being. They disclose themselves to a machine. In that case, students may feel psychologically safer in the interaction with AI. So it reshapes the power structure in the assessment process. But of course, we all understand there are many potential risks of AI use, especially if the student do not know how to use appropriate prompts to obtain useful feedback, or they lack the ability to evaluate the validity of the response they get from AI, or some students just too lazy to think. They rely on AI to get answers without any reflection. I think that will be even harm the students' self-regulated learning, right? Some of our current research have also shown that AI is important, but even more important is students themselves. For example, in this case, we have investigated the correlation between the students' acceptance to AI and their self-reflection, we do find significant correlation. But this significant correlation only occurs when students have a moderate to high level of assessment literacy. That means if the students do not have a proper level of assessment literacy, AI is useless. Okay. In another study, is a qualitative interview study, we found that the student's engagement with the ChatGPT feedback actually at the different various levels. They focus more on cognitive rather than metacognitive strategies. They emotionally acceptance to the ChatGPT feedback, and they have a different level of trust, but the behavioral engagement remains at a still quite superficial level. So feedback literacy, again, plays a very important role in this feedback engagement. And accordingly, we proposed another so-called cyclical self-regulation feedback model based on the research findings. So you can see that this model is more or less aligned with the self-regulated learning model. We divided the feedback process into 3 phases: feedback forethought, feedback control, and feedback retrospect. In each phase, the student needs to have some certain of feedback literacy in order to make each phase work well, and ultimately to make the ChatGPT feedback really can contribute to the learning enhancement. Okay, so again, it shows us ChatGPT or Gen AI could be a game changer in the assessment process, but it really depends on the player, the students themselves, whether they have the capacity, especially the feedback literacy, to harness the power of AI. Okay, I've been reminded the time is flying, so I think I have to be quick about this third part. The third part is very exciting to myself because this is my ongoing project. What is about? It is about using the technology to combine the assessment, teaching, and learning in order to achieve real adaptive learning. Okay, I think this is good timing for the educational change because we all understand the importance of educational efficiency, equality, and the importance of personalized learning. And nowadays, the AI affordance have also made all this possibility, all this required more possible in the current situation. So we want to develop this project called Bottom-Up Assessment Reform, the Student-Centered Assessment-Driven Learning Platform. We want to develop a platform, a digital platform, which can make adaptive learning possible for K-12 students. And by the adaptive learning, we want to empowering meaningful and efficient learning and teaching. Okay. There are several core features about this platform. First of all, we will embed the local curriculum into the platform because the current adaptive learning platforms, many of them in the markets actually fail to meet the local curriculum. Because if you fail to meet the local curriculum, teacher will not use it. Teacher don't use it, student will not use it. So we will put the local curriculum into the platform. And we also want to improve the desired human interaction. We do not want students just sit in front of the computer to talk to the computer without any really human being interaction. This is not what we want. So we will still want to improve the human interaction. Again, as I mentioned before, we want to emphasize the student agency. That is, in this platform, student taking control, not the machine. Okay, the student control the learning, control the machine for the learning, not the other way. And of course, we will make good use of AI. As I mentioned before, we need some appropriate design in order to make AI work for us rather than become a hurdle for the students self-regulated learning. Okay, and this is not only about the AI's power. AI's power, I think, is sufficient, already sufficient for educational purpose. It really depends on the design okay, how we design, how we integrate the AI into our teaching and learning, that matters. But nowadays, I think in many cases, AI is just used without any design, okay? So in many cases, the students' learning is be harmed rather than be promoted. Okay, I think that's all for my sharing. Thank you, and of course, I welcome any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Yanzi, for the very insightful presentations. Yes, the formative assessments is becoming gaining the importance right now, even though in the Indonesian governments, like formative assessments is also being emphasized as one of the indicators in the assessment of accreditations of the schools and university. So it's becoming one of the criterions that the university should cope with. And also, we have also listened from Professor Yanzi that building or making the holistic system of the assessment, including the parents as well, is also becoming the challenge as well in Indonesia, because once a parent is becoming involved, like the roles of parents is not really perceiving the collaborating with the students and also teachers, but instead it's becoming like helping or maybe like creating the homework of the students itself. So it's also problematic when we are talking about the parents. All right, so it's time for the question and answer sessions. Everyone, I believe that so many of you are already getting ready for having a questions, please. Yes.
Thank you for Priyanzi for your lecture. Actually, I have one question. In one of your slides, you tell us that you can use AI to give personalized feedback for the students. Actually, I want you to show us how to do it in order we can also do that, but you don't have any laptop there, so maybe in tomorrow you will give us the workshop, isn't it? Maybe you can use that opportunity, perhaps. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think, first of all, I think the AI's feedback by nature should be personalized. The reason is because most of the AI feedback or response is prompted by the student questions, right? So student question is supposed to be the personal questions regarding learning or whatever learning task. So the AI's response should be personalized. But of course, we need to highlight that even though the questions are raised by the students, but the quality of the questions from students actually at very different levels. Some students can ask very sharp and meaningful questions, which can in turn let the AI provide meaningful response to students to help them to solve the learning task. But some students don't. Okay, so I think they need some training for the students, and also they need some requirement in terms of how we integrate the AI tools into our teaching ecology. For example, in our ongoing project, in the adaptive learning platform, we integrate the AI tools, but we have trained the AI based on large language model. We have trained the AI to provide particularly relevant response to the student's question. For example, just for example, if the student are doing mathematics task, and the student's question has to be based on mathematical task, and the AI's response will be more precise because we pre-trained the AI. We fit all the curriculum of mathematics curriculum, and we fit some of the assessment tasks together with the correct answers. So the AI's response will be more focused and will be more relevant to the students' mathematics task. I think that's the way we can go further. But of course, there are a lot of work to do. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Just like a chat box. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Yes. From Mbak Nurul, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Prof. Yanzi. Thank you for your insightful presentations. For personally, your explanation regarding to the topic today broadened my perspective to see AI, especially contributing to educational assessment. What I want to ask here is because AI has the possibility to integrate in the educational assessment, it is about the role of the teachers because we are as educators, we have a responsibility to like defend our existence, to give the positive value to the students. So because there is a shifting role from the teachers, that I want to ask is, what is the skills or what is the value of the teachers that we need to defend or improve to still exist in the role of the AI here? Because we are a teacher, we have a sense of the students, because if we want to give personalized learning, if we want to give individuals feedback, it means like we have to know the students well. And I think AI doesn't have like a very good understanding of human complexity. So what is the role of the teachers here, Prof? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a very good question. I believe many teachers, for example, in Hong Kong, many K-12 teachers, they share the same concern. If AI is so powerful, if they can do all the things, what the value of teachers? Personally, I don't think we should worry about this at this moment, because in my point of view, I think AI, no matter how powerful it is, just as you just mentioned, it does not have the human beings, the characteristic as a human teachers, right? The AI does not really understand the student's history. Of course, technically the AI can understand the student's history because all the data can be stored in the AI system. But there are so many other things, human being as elements, the AI does not master. That's one. Number two factor is, I think the AI should be used as a tool rather than a replacement. In the example I just mentioned, if a teacher needs to accommodate 30 students in the classroom, in practice it's impossible, right? But now AI provides some facilitation for us. If we can train the AI, if we can have a good monitoring of AI, and then AI can do some time-consuming tasks for us. But still, whether this system works for students, it still requires the teacher's monitoring. Okay, the teacher cannot just let the AI do all the work and the teacher just stand aside. It does not work. I think the most important thing is teacher need to shift their role, that's for sure. Okay, but does not mean the teacher will be replaced by AI. The shifting role means previously, the teacher needs to provide feedback, they need to answer questions, they need to do all the time-consuming tasks. But now, some of these time-consuming tasks can be done by AI under the guidance of the teachers. So the teachers become a higher level of monitor, which AI has become a very powerful tool for teachers. So I think this should be the ideal relationship between AI, teacher, and students. Definitely I don't think teacher will be replaced by AI. But of course, probably, who knows, 10 years later. But at least currently, I don't think that's possible. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we still have time. Any further questions? Yes. We have two ladies over there.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dwi Ektariani. I'm from PhD 2024. So I'm very grateful to meet you on this campus, Prof. Yanzi. Your articles are very much recommended by my lecturer, Pak Bambang, in our class.
Thank you.
And one of which he recommended to me with the title Understanding Music Teachers Formative Assessment, Intention and Implementation, a Chinese mainland context. I'm very interested in studying the findings. I hope one day I can make it to dance teachers in Indonesia. And I found on page 12 that you said generally school policy and support was the only significant predictor of formative assessment, intention, and implementation. However, it shows an integrating contrast effect with a negative effect on music teachers' intention, but a positive one of formative assessment practice. And then in your study, you found that school policy and support had a negative effect on teachers' intention, but a positive one on the actual practice of formative assessment. And what I want to know is, how would you interpret this tension in more depth? And then do you see the potential for policy interventions to lead to formal compliance rather than professional meaning? And then how can policy approaches be more sensitive to teacher autonomy without compromising the consistency of formative assessment implementation at the institutional level? And then, sir, I'm curious about you use structural equation modeling in SEM. Can you tell us about then why you choose that and how to use that one? And the last one is, as a novice researchers interested in assessment practices in education, how do you build the theoretical frameworks and methodological approaches that are so strong and harmonious in every your articles for us? And then are there certain stages or strategies that we can apply so that our scientific writing has the depth of analysis and clarity of structure like your work? Thank you.
Dirasa
Thank you.
prolog.
I think like because today is so special to meet you, so I have so many questions.
My brain has to run very quickly, like a CPU. Okay, let me try my best. I think you have three questions, right? The first question is about the predictor about the teacher's formative assessment practice. I think I have presented one of a study back into 2015, and we have a recent one in 2023, more or less using the similar theoretical framework and the findings. Okay, there are so many predictors involved in our study. I think the most significant or powerful predictor of teachers' formative assessment practice across these two studies are self-efficacy. So if you ask me what the school policy can do to better support the formative assessment practice in classroom, I think we need to, if we can only do one thing, we need to try our best to enhance the teacher's self-efficacy in the formative assessment. And of course, according to the psychological theory, there are a bunch of ways to enhance the person's self-efficacy, right? So we can do some design some professional intervention programs according to the psychological theory in order to enhance the teacher's self-efficacy. The intention thing is, I think, is a little bit tricky, because if you look at the literacy of the theory of planned behavior, you will find that in addition to self-efficacy, intention also plays a very crucial role. But interestingly is, in my two studies about the formative assessment practice, intention is not a powerful predictor of a teacher's formative assessment practice. My guess is, because I do not have a direct empirical data, we have a little bit interview, but many largely speculative. So my guess is The theory of planned behavior in the psychology literature is mainly used for the personal behavior. For example, exercise or keep fit. This personal behavior is largely controlled by yourself. If you want to do exercise, you can do exercise, right? The contact factor or contact limitation is not so powerful. But for formative assessment practice, it's a little bit different. Even if you are very willing to do formative assessment, but there are so many contextual limitations. For example, you have a too big class, you have too many students to look after, and you have too many classes to teach, you do not have time. Things like that. All these are very important contextual limitations which can hinder your doing the formative assessment practice. So our study found that intention seems not that important in determining the teacher's formative assessment practice. Okay. The second question? Same. I think we will have a better or detailed answer tomorrow, workshops. First of all, I can provide a very quick response. First of all, I think as SEM nowadays still quite dominant in the social science research. If you want to find the relationship between the latent traits, I think SEM is still the first choice for you to do that. I think a little bit unique feature of my analysis is that I usually, not all, for many of my study, I usually do Rush analysis first, and then do, based on Rush measures, I do SEM. It's a tricky and a controversial issue. I don't think there is an ideal solution for this method. Even for myself, I think my previous analysis, there's still many weaknesses there. And to be honest, I do not think nowadays there is a software can perfectly solve this Rush analysis plus SEM problem. It's still ongoing area, need more work to do that. But anyway, my suggestion to you is, if you want to have a high quality data, you need to do Rush analysis. But if you are not a measurement, you do not have a very strong belief on measurement, and you just want to do regular social science or educational research, I think traditional SEM will be sufficient for you. Especially for early career researcher, I think you should not get into muddy water, right? You just use the most straightforward thing to do that. So SEM, I think, still the first option for you to do. If you have more time, more resources, you can try some more advanced or sophisticated analytical method to do that. Okay. The third question, any strategy? Yes. I think, unfortunately, there are no tips. Just practice make perfect. I think when I look back into my early work, my first or second paper, you will find it's a little bit embarrassing. Yeah, there's so many errors, so many limitations there. But I think that's the necessary step, right? You learn from your error. You learn from your practice. So, of course, I admit that there are some strategies. It's not, practice is most important, but there is some strategies that can make your practice more efficient. So I think one of the strategies is to model. That is, you based on your research topic, based on your area, you find the top journal, find the top high quality paper. Then you're trying to model their writing style, their structure of the paper, their argumentation. And I think that could be easiest way for you to start in a more productive way. The second is, I think you need to find your own way, because different people have different writing style and a different preference, even in terms of the analytical methods. For example, some people like Amos to ACM, some people like M+, some people like OWL. I think all of them are good. It's just which one fits you better. So you need to find your own style. I'm trying to build a standardized format or flow for your study. For example, you can develop a standardized format for survey study. The structure, the methodology, more or less the same. And every time you do survey study, you just use this template of your own template, okay? Then it would be much more productive. But of course, that template has to build on the high quality papers models. You cannot build from just from your own ideas. You need to have some standardized format there. Okay. So I think this strategy could be useful, but still, most important, you need to practice. Just writing, keep writing.
Okay, I think we still have time. Yes. There are three. Can you please give to the ladies over there? I think that is after Badui.
Good morning, Prof. Yanzi. It's nice to meet you here, and thank you so much for your great presentation. My name is Fauzana. I am a PhD in educational studies. So regarding your presentation, especially the role of AIs in education systems, as we know that AI's influence on education is already becoming undeniable. And so I would like to have your opinion regarding the growing impact of AI in education, especially on current learning systems. As you explained on your presentation that AI power is sufficient, and I agree with it. For example, in the grading system, so AI can instantly grade assignments and provide personalized feedback, saving hours of time for teachers. However, in terms of its impact in the future of education system and its human resources, I have a question. Do you think that someday AI will replace the teacher's role in the future, especially in the learning assessment system? And the second question, how do you predict the influence of AI of education on education, especially in human resources in the future? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think for the first one, we have discussed a little bit before. First of all, I do not think AI will replace teachers' role. I think AI will be very important tools or instruments used by teachers to further enhance the teaching and learning effectiveness. But of course, if the teacher wants to harness the power of AI, they need to shift their role, okay? They need to just put some of the time-consuming tasks aside to AI and save some of the teacher's time to do a higher level monitoring and to focus more on the pedagogical design, which can better integrate the AI into the teaching and learning circle. So in short, I think AI presents both challenges and opportunities to us, especially as a teacher, and we have to embrace it because it's just there. It's a fact. You have to embrace it. You cannot avoid it. And if you want to embrace it, you just need to reconsider the role of pedagogy and the role of AI and the relationship between them. Of course, I think there are a lot of work to do. Probably no one at this moment can provide a very concrete solution for teachers, but the directions, I think, is still quite clear. There are some major questions the teacher needs to answer is, how can I use AI to reduce my repetitive workload? This is one of the interesting questions. How can I make AI to make my teaching job more efficient, more effective? And also, how can I teach my student to better use AI in order to make the learning better? So I think these are very important questions teachers need to ask if they want to really make good use of AI in the learning and teaching circle. But again, I believe teacher has its role, even though AI is powerful. Okay. The second question, you're talking about the AI's implementation in the education system, right? I think it's quite relevant to the first question. It's just beyond the teacher. For example, just as I mentioned, in nowadays so many adaptive learning platforms on the markets, the students or parents or schools can use them for the students' learning. I think it could be risky if the teachers and students and parents do not know how to make good use of AI. Because very simple example is, if the parents buy some apps for their kids, and the AI can easily provide solution or answer to the teachers, to the students' assignment, you can imagine most of the kids will just rely on AI to get the answer quickly without any real learning. So that's quite risky. What we really want is that the platform can provide scaffolding for students rather than answers for students. And this is exactly what my system or my platform undergoing wants to address. We want AI provide scaffolding based on AI's power, but we do not want AI to provide the direct answer to the students. So I think that's a very important differentiation we need to make for the use of AI.
I believe that we still have a question from gentlemen back there, and then ladies over here.
Check. Thank you. Am I audible? Well, back to your topic on the screens, we've been discussing about assessment for learning and assessment as learning. Following up the questions about the emergence of artificial intelligence.
Excuse me, can you introduce yourself before
Okay.
asking questions?
I am Furqanul Hakim, the second batch PhD. I'm thinking about the feedback, the quality of the feedback, when we talk about the utilizations of artificial intelligence, subjective and also objective feedback. Sometimes as a human being, we have the limitations to provide very concise and also objective feedback to our students, especially if we have overload or the big numbers of amounts of students in the classroom, let's say. Sometimes what we are facing right now as students, me as personally, sometimes I feel like most of the teachers or maybe lecturers, they have a personal intentions toward a specific characteristic of student per se. And that's why it leads to the quality of their feedback when they want to give the feedback to the students. And when I also experience very objective feedback or comments and also assessments given by the teachers or lecturers like that, then I think when the artificial intelligence come up, and then I think because there's no the potential of the AI to have a subjectivity, they just focus on the products you have. Then they don't understand your background, they don't understand what's going on in the classroom, but what do the AI understand is, what does the AI understand is your quality of your work. Sometimes I'm really curious to compare the objectivity of the feedback providing by the teachers or as a human being and this kind of the tools. I understand we cannot replace the role of teachers in terms of engagements, the interactions, or the learning environments, yes, but sometimes in terms of assessment, because we talk about assessment as learning, we want to learn something to improve our skill or capacity. And to get that, we have to achieve more subjective feedback in order we can improve our skill as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So this is comments, right?
Is this a comment, Mas Furqan, or do you, because
I want to listen your perspective comparing about the emergence of AI and also the assistance of teachers as the one who give the assessment to the students in terms of objectivity of assessment.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I think there are some empirical studies on these topics, but unfortunately, I think the fundings are usually inconclusive. So some study shows that the AI-generated feedback seems more productive than the teachers or peers' feedback in terms of the enhancing the students' learning outcome. But some studies proves another way. I think this is not surprising, because especially when this topic is still at the very beginning stage. In my point of view, I think there are advantages and as well as disadvantages of AI-generated feedback. As you just mentioned, because of AI is a machine, so it might be more free of the human bias when they provide feedback to the students' output, because it's very simple, they're just based on the students' output against to the assessment rubrics, okay? There's no human beings, emotion or bias or halo effect, something like that in there. So in some cases, their feedback probably appears more objective. But also, many people will argue the real crucial thing about teaching is being a human, right? Being a human, you know your students, you know their background, you know their past, you know the feeling, you know the emotions. That's the so-called art of teaching. But the AI does not have these parts. So in some cases, you can also find many studies showing that even though the student feel AI can provide some useful feedback, they still rely on or trust more on teachers' feedback, because they think the teachers knows them better than the AI. Even though sometimes probably they get more emotional stressful to get feedback from teachers, but they still rely on more on the teacher's feedback. So I think this is another reason I keep on saying teacher will always have your own role rather than to be replaced by the AI. The critical thing is how teacher can make good use of AI, that how teacher can make AI to be a supplementary tools for themselves. For example, based on your description, if the teacher can ask AI to provide some so-called free of bias feedback to the students, and then the teacher probably can add some more humans comments to that AI-generated feedback. I think that integration might provide some better effects in some cases. Yes, so that's my opinion. I think there's nothing one replace the other, but about how we can better make these two supplementary each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yanzi. There is another question. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Yanzi, for your insightful presentation. I learned so much today. So I have actually two questions, which I believe is very simple. So this question is belong to your first part of the presentation, which is related to self-assessment. So from your presentation, you mentioned that one of the crucial aspects that contribute to the student self-assessment is the access for them to receive feedback and possess feedback literacy skill, which is in here, the formative assessment plays a crucial role, right? So if the students happen to be in the environment where the formative assessment is very limited given to them by the teacher, or even they do not have a formative assessment given by the teacher, is there still any like a possibility for students to enhance their feedback literacy? Because in many cases, especially in pesantren, a teacher only lecture. The only assessment they have is a summative assessment. Even if they have formative assessment, they treat it as a summative assessment. They scared the student like, oh, if you fail this formative assessment, it will contribute to the lower score for your summative assessment and something like that. So because referred to Professor Dr. Joanna lecture yesterday, student can escape poor teaching, but they cannot escape poor assessment. And this is, I think, the exact example of they cannot escape a poor assessment if they only have like one-time assessment throughout the semester. So yeah, so that's my number one question. And second question is, as I see formative assessment is very important to be given to students regularly, so I think it is best to given to the student starting from early education. So if the case is in early education, how is a better way for us as a teacher to start giving formative assessment to the small children? I think that's my question, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Both are very good questions. I think for first one is about the differentiation between the summative and formative assessment. I agree with you if the teacher or the learning environment does not provide too much formative assessment feedback or opportunity for students, it is a disadvantage for the student to do the self-assessment or assessment as learning, because first of all, the student will lack opportunity, lack of training to do that. The second is the student will lack useful feedback for them to calibrate their self-assessment or their self-reflection. So that's a sad truth. This is of course why we always highlight that we especially when for our Teacher Education Institute, we need to highlight the importance of a formative assessment. Okay, the second point I think is about the assessment design. I cannot say the exam design is not good in your case, probably because of the discipline nature. It really requires some summative examination in order to make sure all the students have fulfilled a certain grade of the minimum requirement. So I think that's still valid for the summative assessment. It's just because I always thinking the summative and formative assessment should not be put onto the two extreme end. Actually, they can be transformed from each other. For example, the high-stake examination you just mentioned can actually become a very useful formative assessment if, for example, the tutor can provide some feedback after the exam, right? Then the student can learn better from the exam score or the incorrect answer the student have given to obtain in this exam. And of course, if the students themselves, they have better assessment literacy, they can have better self-reflection on those difficult questions appearing in the exam. I think that will be very useful formative assessment resources for the students. In Hong Kong, one of my co-authors, the David Carlis, once advocate a very important claim is so-called formative use of summative assessment. That is, in some scenario, Summative assessment is always important. That's the social norm, okay? In this case, if you want to do a better formative assessment, but you do not have too much resources, then the best way for you to do is make the formative use of the summative assessment. Just like the exam score, the exam feedback, or exam paper, the student and the teachers can make use of them, trying to get more feedback from those exam paper for the next stage of the study. Okay. The second question, I think, yes, I agree with you. We need to start the training of assessment as learning, start training of students as early as possible. I have never done assessment as learning study in early childhood education, but I have done something in primary one school. And surprised me that many teachers, they are surprised that the primary one student actually they can do very good, very productive self-assessment. So I think age should not be a hurdle for the self-assessment or other form of assessment as learning. Even though in early childhood, in kindergarten context, I do believe the student can be trained to do the self-assessment, self-reflection. I think the most simple way to train them possibly be the questioning and answer. And actually, almost all the teachers are doing this, right? You ask a question to the kids will respond to you, and then you can provide the second round of feedback to the students' response. And you make every opportunity to ask, to guide the kids to self-reflect their answer or the peers' answer. I think that will be huge amount of opportunity for them to practice assessment as learning, even though not in this lane, okay? They just do asking question, answer question. They do not use feedback, assessment as learning, this terminology, but they are doing the same thing.
Thank you. I think that will be the last question for our session today. Thank you, Professor Yanzi. So in these sessions, we actually learned very much about formative assessments, the importance of formative assessment, and also promoting the students' agency to make sure that students take controls, especially if we talk in the digital environment like this. And also, AI will not replace the teacher's roles as long as we are as teachers keeps questioning and learning about the roles as a teachers in facilitating teaching and learning, especially when we are using the AI, not to replace the roles of the teachers, but to be the supplementary tools when working with the repetitive workload as a teachers. Thank you, Professor Yanzi, and thank you all. This is the end of our keynote speaker session, and I'm giving back to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you very much, Professor Yanzi, for that insightful and compelling presentation on assessment research into enhancing learning and teaching.
Triple IU has a token of appreciation for Professor Yanzi. We kindly request the head of PhD program, Bapak Bambang Sumintono, PhD, to give the token of appreciation to our keynote speaker. Thank you. You may be seated. For today's panel session, there are some announcements. We have moved the panel session 2A at 10:40 a.m. to the Theater A, this venue. And we also moved the panel session 3D at 1 p.m. to this theater. So the panel session 2A will be, the speaker will be Rifda Kotrunada Arum and Arum Etikariena and Debbie Zalina and Insof. The speaker in panel session 3D, Muhammad Hairul, Queen Salsabila and Nabila, Andrea Genta and Eka Yusmaita.
Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of the main agenda for today, and our next agenda is the panel presentation in the various classrooms, the teleconference room, and the main lecture room. All of you are invited to join the panel presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your presence and attention. We would like to invite all of you at 4:20 p.m. to the same room, Theater Faculty A, to close the event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.